Hi, my name is John, the career coach. When they ask you, tell us a little bit about your weaknesses, what should you say? Bearing in mind, you don't want to say something that is going to disadvantage you during the interview. Hautaki kuchoma. Because sometimes what we do is we say something and immediately the interview is over, because what you've said you cannot retract and it disqualifies you for that interview. So how do you answer this question? One of the things that I want you to bear in mind when they ask this question is the reason why we are asking you to tell us a little bit about your weaknesses is we are trying to test your emotional intelligence. We want to see how self-aware you are. Someone who is highly self-aware, someone who is highly emotional intelligent is going to know what their weaknesses are. Some of us have not thought about what our weaknesses are. In fact, there are so many people of us who are working in organizations and going about our lives not knowing what our weaknesses are. So when someone points it out, you become defensive because it's not something that you've thought about. So knowing who you are, what your strengths and your weaknesses are is very important, even outside of the interview. So let me give you my own personal example. My personality is choleric. So we have 4 types of personality. So there's the choleric, the sanguine, the melancholy, and the phlegmatic. So if you know what your personality is, and if you can be able to know what the weaknesses of these personalities are, then you're able to know what some of your weaknesses could be. So personally, I know some of my strengths are I'm very good at problem solving. I'm a very good planner. I'm highly focused, highly ambitious, I'm a leader. Some of my weaknesses are I can be very low on empathy, I can be inflexible, I can be intolerant, I can be impatient. Some of my other weaknesses are I could have anger outbursts. These episodes are few and far between, but they are there. But you see how during an interview, I do not want to lead by saying I have anger outbursts, because then if I'm being hired, then they look at me like we are going to hire you and then you're going to come and shout at everyone in the organization. So you also need to use your wisdom to know which of the weaknesses to say and which ones not to say. Of course, I wouldn't advise that you say you give a weakness like you're a perfectionist, because that's not an authentic weakness. You want to give a weakness that is actually true, because this question can actually highly increase your chances of landing a job. At the same time, it can highly increase your chances the chances that you do not get the job, either if you give a wrong weakness or you give a cliche weakness like you're a perfectionist. So that is why you need to do this exercise. Think about what your personality is, think about what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this personality, and then identify which weaknesses to put. So what criteria do you use to decide which weakness to say during an interview and which weakness not to say? The first thing that you want to do is you want to study the job description in and out so that you understand the kind of person that they're looking for. Having that in mind, then you can go through your weaknesses, and so you're able to pick the weakness that is not going to be in direct conflict with this role. So like now, for example, let's go back to my own personal weaknesses. I'm impatient, I'm intolerant, I can be aggressive, I can have very high expectation of on people, I can be low on empathy. What are some of the weaknesses that I do not want to mention during an interview, in as much as they are accurate? So I wouldn't want to mention something like anger outbursts during an interview, for example, because then that is going to be in direct conflict with so many positions. So you want to use your wisdom to know which weakness to say and which weakness not to say. Of course, I would not advise you to say something like perfectionist, because it's one of the weaknesses that people just Google, and they so many people are going to say they're a perfectionist when asked this question. So do not use a cliche weakness like perfectionist. You want to give a weakness that is true, that is authentic, but at the same time, it's not going to be in direct conflict with this role that you're applying for. So after saying what your weaknesses are, the next thing that you want to say is, what are you doing about this weakness? So don't just say a weakness and leave it at that. You want to say the weakness and you want to say what you're doing about it, because if you say a weakness like you are impatient, it's not, it's trying to work on being impatient is not being told to study a master's in engineering. It's something that you can actually do. It's something that you can actually work on, so that then you can move from a 2 out of 10 to 8 out of 10. So what are you doing about that weakness? Remember, when you answer this question correctly, if you can be able to give an authentic weakness, and if you're able to say what you're doing about this weakness to become a better person, then it shows the interviewer that you're self-aware. You are a highly emotionally intelligent person, and any employer wants to hire an emotionally intelligent person. So it means you're scoring highly on the softer skills. So what is the moral of the story? The moral of the story is you need to be highly self-aware. Be aware of your personality, be aware of your strengths, be aware of your weaknesses. When someone tells you what your weaknesses are, you are highly likely to be less defensive if you already know. So if you come and tell me I'm impatient, or I'm intolerant, or I'm low on empathy, I will not feel very defensive, because it's something that I already know. So you're coming to actually confirm something. But knowing what your weaknesses are is not enough. Know what your weaknesses are, work on those weaknesses, so that then when you go for an interview and they ask you that question, you are not coiling, you're not shrinking, you're not going to go blank, because you confidently be able to say, these are some of my weaknesses, this is what I'm trying to do to work on myself, and this is what I'm going to do to ensure that this weakness is not standing in the way of me performing very well in my job. That's all that I had for today. I hope this video has been beneficial. Thank you, and see you next time.